Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1031 just came out, and this may have been my favorite chapter of the Onigashima raid so far. I think actually it almost definitely is. It may be one of my favorite chapters of the entire series. I feel like this is one that I'm probably going to go back and reread a few times, even years down the line, right? Just because I feel like we've never had a scene, a storyline, a moment like this for Sanji in the entire story. It poses something very fundamentally new, unique, a challenge that he has never faced before, and I'm probably not even going to get that in-depth into it in this review, simply because I have so much I want to say about it. You can watch out for an analysis video, a mini analysis video, something along those lines, coming out this Tuesday or Wednesday. But before that, let's just get into the chapter. We'll take it from top to bottom. I'll break down, at least at some level, everything that I really liked about this chapter. So, starting with the Kid Law versus Big Mom scene. I mentioned before last week how I felt like the awakenings were anticlimactic, right? So I'm not as caught up in, I think, a lot of the discussion that people were throwing around about okay, well, what are the logistics? When did they figure this out? Was this properly hinted at, foreshadowed? I don't think that's that important in One Piece. I think that in One Piece, Oda is always able to make these surprise power-ups work, because Oda is so good at revealing them in a very, memorable, iconic, climactic way, right? And I felt that was what was lacking with the awakenings, not the fact that Oda didn't tell us that they had awakenings beforehand. I felt that he lacked his usual sort of pizzazz that makes it a really exciting scene. And, I felt like awakenings were kind of underwhelming at the end of the day. So that's all to say that I think that there is definitely hope for the fight going forward, because it's clear that Big Mom is not down and out, right? And it's clear, I think, that Kid and Law are gonna have to pull something more, out of their sleeves in order to take her down, if they take her down. Still don't believe they will, but if they're set to take her down here, I still believe that they have to pull more out of their sleeves. So, maybe the reason awakenings were underwhelming was simply because that's not the big moment that they're gonna show that they're, their strongest abilities or whatever else they might have to have. Maybe Kid conquers Haki, like some people speculate. Who knows, okay? But the Kid and Law side aside, I loved Big Mom this chapter, because Big Mom showed us some stuff that we'd never seen before and we had no idea that she could do. So, primarily, she can essentially eat her own... I don't even understand how this works. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense. So she can eat her own lifespan to just keep getting more buff. What happens if she ate she ate 1 year of her lifespan, and not just, so I couldn't tell how much bigger she became because she always looks huge, but Napoleon looks gigantic at this point. Napoleon is, it's like the Eiffel Tower. It's ridiculous. And, a lot of the aesthetic things that went along with that transformation, her skin turned a lot darker. Again, I feel like it's a mix between, how much of this type of stuff is she's just coating herself in Haki versus just Oda doing some shading, similar to the Nico Robin scenario. That's not important. But point being, she does look a lot more intimidating here. It does feel like, now it feels like they're up against an emperor who's going actually serious, actually try hard, right? I did say before that I felt like, some of the stakes that I was feeling in Wano, at least in this later stretch, it's still not quite there. This chapter, I did feel like Oda is putting the effort in. He's changing some things. I felt like this chapter maybe is a shift towards that direction. So I like the scene that we began the chapter with, and then moving along in the chapter, we have Yamato, Appu, and X-Drake. Oh, and the numbers. I can't forget about the numbers, because the numbers are actually going to be important characters, it looks like. So most of you have seen, I think the only really important part of this scene, well, that's not really fair. Okay, look, the most important part of this scene, I think, is semi-confirmation of that theory that was going around a little while ago, of that the 3 samurai that Yamato met in the cave are the same as the 3 numbers that we have here. I think at this point it is very unlikely that this theory is incorrect, because Oda even had the one number that we would all expect to be Shimotsuki Uchimaru, to be the one to recognize, identify with, and chase after Yamato, right? That is what we would expect if these numbers were the 3 samurai. Oda would take the main samurai, right, Shimotsuki Uchimaru, and have him reconnect with Yamato, and it'll be something important for Yamato here, right? So, I think that the direction that's headed has a lot of different possibilities. Again, I think, look, if this is, I'm not even going to talk about certain routes, okay? But I'll save it for other videos. You know what? Let's talk about X, Drake, and Apu. So X, Drake, and Apu, I like the fact that we get some clarification on Apu's abilities. I think the idea that, you just have to hold your ears to be able to stop his abilities, that in itself is, I don't know, it would make for some kind of one-dimensional fights in that you kind of just have to, I don't know if you guys heard that, you kind of just have to hold your ears and just run around and try and swing your sword at him. I like the fact that it's further clarified that you can, just get out of the way as long as you're not in his line of sight. He can't quite hit you. I think in future Apu battles, if we do get those, that'll be a little more, fun to see than just a character holding his ears. Now, as for X Drake versus Apu, whether or not it's going to continue, that's a really hard question to answer because it almost makes you wonder, okay, then why then would Oda broach the subject of these two forming an alliance? Apu clearly wants to form an alliance with literally anyone that he can find, so he's like, okay, X Drake, no. Yamato, no. All right, who's he going to move on to next, right? I don't know why Oda would bring up this concept of an alliance if that's just not going to... Well, they don't have to form an alliance, but I'm just saying if it's not going to lead anywhere. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if these two are just going to go back to fighting and finish out their battle. It would feel a little weird if that's just sort of the direction that this whole thing played out, because you would not have needed to sort of take a break in the middle and talk about creating an alliance. So that stuff is on the shelf for the moment. And finally, we have the Sanji stuff. Again, video on the Sanji stuff coming out Tuesday, Wednesday, depends how fast I can get it out. But I do think it is maybe Sanji's best character moment in the entire series. I actually tweeted that out recently before I did this chapter review. So I am going to stick by that. I think it legitimately is the best chapter for Sanji in the entire story of One Piece. I'll be elaborating more on that in depth, in next week's video. But long and short of it, I'll say that it forced Sanji to face a character dilemma that kind of gets to the very heart of what his character is. And let's say at the very least in the short term, right, based on what we were all wondering about, like how's this Germa stuff going to go, what's going to happen, etc. I recently talked about it could make or break his character, right? And I really hammered in the idea that, look, the stuff in Whole Cake Island is really, 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 really important. Oda can't just hand wave that away. That stuff, that defines the fundamentals of what Sanji's character is all about. So if Sanji's being written into this corner where he's starting to transform into Germa, into a soldier of science, and getting these nice, cool power-ups to go with it, right? It can't be simple. Whatever happens can't be simple. Oda can't just write Sanji just being like, okay, you know what? If I'm fighting for my friends, then it's okay or whatever, right? Then it's okay for me to turn into a monster. And that was what was so interesting about the situation, that Oda posed a really interesting conflict for Sanji. And I was really looking forward to seeing how that would be resolved. The thing is, none of us could really tell what's the avenue that Oda would go that could make this feel right for the character, right? Because you do want him to get the power up in a sense. You do want him to become stronger. You do want him to defeat Queen. But at the same time, that can't happen at the expense of the character and everything that was established in the previous arc. And so many of the ideas that were being thrown around were kind of very questionable. Things like, well, Sanji should just, as I said, his character arc will be learning that it's okay to be a monster for the sake of his friends. Or Chopper telling him something like that, or realizing that Germa science isn't all that bad. Those are terrible ideas, right? Those are terrible. It's throwing 80 chapters of writing of Whole Cake Island, and honestly a series worth of writing of Sanji's character in the gutter, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what his character is about. So the answer Oda had to find was something that none of us as readers could think of, right? And what Oda chose was to write a scene that I think is the encapsulation of everything that is Sanji, right? What Oda chose was basically, no, Sanji's of course not going to change. Rather, he is going to stick to who he is harder than, we could ever have imagined, to the point that basically he is going to play out the rest of this fight, but he's willing to throw away his life at the end of it, right? That's how hard... I think that just goes to show how important everything we learn in Whole Cake Island was, right? It's never going to be as simple as okay, it's okay for Sanji to sacrifice on some of his ideals, just to win a fight or something like that. That's never going to be the case. If Sanji's transforming into something he's not, he will always pick to stay true to himself, even if it's at the detriment of, like even just staying alive. So I think that the fight, you can kind of break into, like, what's the best moment of the chapter you can break. There's 4 really, really, really great moments, I think, and like that's part of why it makes it feel like such a memorable scene. Just starting with Sanji having his dilemma, okay, would I rather be this person or this person? Would Luffy rather want this person or this person? And I like the fact that he's got Luffy in mind while he's making this decision. It's not just about him. It goes to show, like, he's a Straw Hat through and through, obviously, so every decision he makes is not just his decision, it's also a decision that affects Luffy, and that's actually kind of the priority in his mind. So, am I going to be this person or this person, right? And the moment of to just destroy the raid suit was beautiful, because it reminds me of moments like Luffy himself destroying the log posts on the way to, well, turned out to be on the way to Little Garden that Nico Robin gave them, right? Or Luffy destroying the mirror against Katakuri. Moments of just, it's a very difficult decision the character is faced with, but for the character, in that moment of sheer clarity, it becomes very simple and very obvious of what they need to do, and they take a very definitive action that they cannot go back on, that shows the strength of their spirit or their resolve, right? So, love that, just destroying the raid suit, right? Oh, a little before this, he hit a woman. That's actually a really, really good character moment for Sanji, as weird as that is to say, but I think that goes without saying. Who here actually thought that Sanji would ever hit a woman over the course of the entire series? Like, entire series, who thought that he would ever hit a woman? And the first woman that he really hit was not like a strong opponent, like a Black Maria or anything like that. It was literally just an innocent woman. Whoever thought that would happen? So started the whole scenario with breaking one of Sanji's, like, the cardinal rule, right? Then the raid suit moment, which in itself was obviously amazing. Then the Zoro conversation, which just added, I don't know, it doubled down on everything that was happening, because Sanji's discussing this character dilemma and what's happening to him. Well, obviously not in depth with Zoro, but basically the concluding point of it, it's Zoro that he asks to essentially end him if things go, fully the worst direction, right? So it's a great way of Oda establishing to us that Sanji is it's do or die, right? Like, if Sanji completes this transformation, then he will sacrifice his life, right? It's a great way for Oda to tell us that that's what's going to happen by having it communicated through a conversation between Sanji and Zoro, just because of everything that these two have been through. And it means that that Sanji is absolutely serious, because it's not like he's just saying, oh, I'm going to kill myself if I end up turning into Germa. Rather, Sanji is actually handing it to an executioner, handing that responsibility to an executioner that he knows is going to do the job, right? Like, he knows that if he's telling Zoro, if I'm not myself, then I would not want to live, that Zoro very possibly would be the one who would be willing and capable of executing that job, right? So that is Sanji essentially signing his own death sentence. So it makes it a very powerful moment, because it shows you that Sanji is very serious about what he wants to do, right? Like, this is basically signing away his life if things go a certain direction. And it helps that the moment is with Zoro, who, like, the last time something like this happened was the nothing happened moment. And, there's actually a lot of similarities here to that moment, if you think about it, for different reasons, for very different reasons, but for what it shows for the character in terms of who they are, okay? And I'll elaborate on that in next week's video. But it is a very similar moment in that sense. And on top of that, I think that, I like it for Zoro as well, because, Zoro, it shows a little bit of Zoro's soft-heartedness, in that Zoro does not want Sanji to die at the end of this. And even though he's saying that, yeah, of course, if you're not the Sanji I know at the end of this, I'll finish you off, because in that case, it wouldn't be the Sanji he knows. But don't you die until that happens, right? So Zoro, obviously, he's really banking on Sanji not being alive at the end of this. I will say, I also wonder whether or not Zoro would kill Sanji, despite everything I just said, and despite what Sanji believes that Zoro would be a willing executioner. I wonder if it came down to it, if Zoro could do it. I feel like actually maybe not, but maybe I'm underestimating what Zoro is capable of. And then, like, the cherry on top to cap it off is the reemergence of Hell's memories. Have not seen that move in ever in the New World. Have literally not seen it in the New World. Last we saw it was in Fishman Island, which is not technically the New World. It's directly underneath. So we have not seen this move used whatsoever, and Oda was really saving it. I feel like this chapter just shows how much Oda was thinking ahead about Sanji's character. He did not have him use a move like Hell's Memories up to this point, and I like that fact because it's Sanji throwing away the raid suit, right? So I'm not going to use this science stuff. I'm going to stay true to myself, and he busts out the move that we've been waiting for him to use for such a long period of time, the natural move that he has trained over the course of the time skip, the move that is really the essence of him. Hell's Memories is basically his own rage, his own passion, his own fiery emotions, etc. It's the total opposite of everything that Germa is. So I love the sequence of events in this chapter. I think that, I think now that I've talked it out, I think that this is the best chapter of Onigashima, definitely the Onigashima raid. In my opinion, I think that this is the best, at least for me. And I'll add this at the end. A lot of people have been saying, like, we're just gonna say the arc is bad if the raid doesn't fail. And people have gone to the lens of, like, clipping out clips from my stream and editing them to take out the context to make it seem like I'm saying it will be a bad arc if the raid doesn't fail. Let's be clear here. I want the raid to fail because I feel like Wano has been missing certain elements, and I feel like the raid failing and them being defeated here would be a great avenue, in my opinion, maybe the best avenue to open up a lot of those elements coming into play. However, if Oda writes chapters like these, where those elements that I feel like are missing are actually, written into the story in a way that is this powerful, this memorable, this iconic, I would be perfectly happy. I'm just sad that we don't have more chapters like these. That's all I'm saying. Like, I feel like this was the first chapter. It's like you don't know what's missing till you see it, right? And this chapter, I think, is the encapsulation of that, right? A character as important as Sanji having a storyline, a dilemma that he has to deal with that is somewhat unprecedented because Wano is such an important, huge arc. They're taking on an Emperor's crew. I would love to see the characters go through things that they have never had to go through before, right? And not just in terms of, well, technically they're fighting a stronger opponent, but actually what the character is going through. So that these moments actually mean something, and it feels like there's some substance to the story behind everything that they're doing. So I really, really like that. I just want the arc to be something that I personally can really enjoy and look fondly back on and be happy rereading and feel like, One Piece has continued to impress me and surpass my expectations and stuff. And that's what this chapter really did. It surpassed my expectations. Again, I think it's the best Sanji chapter in the series. I'm not saying every chapter in Wano needs to be the best chapter of something in the series. Like, I don't need the best Zoro chapter in the series. I don't know how you could even top Nothing Happened. But I would like something really good for his character. I would just like something really, like... I'm not going to go in depth into the things that I feel like I would like to personally see more of in Wano here. But I'll just say that this was a great example of something that I think you can clearly say was not present in the Onigashima raid up till this point. And I would happily like to see more of this. So that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe.